Right now, Flight 191, American Airlines, is just smoldering ruins. Rescue crews are seemingly unable to get very close to that wreckage. It departed O'Hare Field around 3:15 today. We still know nothing about why the plane crashed. We do know that it lost an engine, but of course that normally doesn't mean that the plane will crash. Many rescue vehicles leaving the area, more coming in, fighting rush hour traffic to get there. Just an unbelievable sight. Hundreds of people milling around, wishing that they could help, wanting to help, I'm sure. But the heat is so intense from the smoldering wreckage, it's almost impossible to get close to some of the areas of the plane that are left.
We're reporting this afternoon on the worst commercial air disaster in United States commercial aviation history. At O'Hare Field, Flight 191, American Airlines, bound for Los Angeles. The account of possible disaster victims ranges from 263 up to 279, some as high as 290. Hugh Hill is now in position at O'Hare Field to give us our first direct on-the-scenes report. Hugh?
We're standing at the Oasis on the toll road overlooking the scene of this crash. There are no survivors. No survivors. And I asked everybody I could find. Now, I have just returned from a complete tour of that scene. I walked completely around it and inside to try and look at the debris. Well, there's not much left. A few pieces of metal here and there, indications of the fuselage perhaps or the tail. So it was a complete disintegration, and from what we heard earlier, it was a ball of fire which shot into the air after the plane exploded.
Other than those 3 injuries on the ground, were there any other possible injuries around here?
All the fatalities that we have right now are the fatalities that were on the plane.
You think
it was Flight 191, American Airlines.
The 3 on the ground in the trailer court were the only people on the ground who were...
That's the only injuries I have assessed right now, yes, that's correct.
Are you ready now?
Mayor Byrne and Commissioner Albright at the scene of the plane disaster. Right behind us over in this area, Tom, if you can pan over, there's really not much to see in terms of what you might expect in seeing the debris of an airplane. It is just hunks and pieces, although on the far side, it's obvious that there is an engine over in that area. It appears to have been burned as well. Commissioner Albright, as he just reported, indicated that it apparently had left the airplane, separated from the aircraft before it actually plowed into the ground, and the plane literally did plow into the ground. There is a rather deep furrow. When we arrived here, the flames were coming up from the ground. Actually, it's probably 2 or 3 feet deep in that area, where the plane just simply nosed in and tore up the earth before it came to rest in a jumble of pieces.
We flew over the scene probably a half hour after the accident, and as we flew right down 32 right, the runway to the northwest, which the departing American Airlines DC-10 had just taken, you could see debris on the runway. In the background there, you see the fuel tanks, which would have been a major inferno had the plane crashed there. And then just in front of those, you start to see rows and rows of the mobile homes. There were thousands of people in those homes, and this pilot crashed in the only available open space between the end of that runway and those obstacles. So let's go back to our live remote. Here's Jim Gibbons with more. Jim?
We are back live at the scene, and a rather grim task has begun. Tom, I'm going to ask you to pan the camera over to where the firemen are working right now. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but right in front of that fire engine, the first one that we see, there is now a tag with a number 1 on it. A small tag. It's a flag sticking up from the ground. Over maybe 10 or 15 feet to its right, another tag with the number 2. I'm told that those are identifying flags for the bodies. I'm starting to see quite a few of them around there. They may be, yes, it appears that that's what they are. The firemen are going in now. Vehicles all over the area, fire department standing by, no hope of any survivors now, that much has been confirmed. a temporary morgue will have to be set up. And so the job goes on under bright sunshine.
Well, Jim Gibbons did talk earlier with Mayor Byrne and with Fire Commissioner Richard Albrecht, and they both arrived on the scene very shortly after the crash. And we'd like to show you the interview that Jim did with those two.
There are no survivors.
There are no survivors? Did you hear of any injuries in the surrounding area?
There were 3 injuries on the ground. They've been taken to the hospital, but they are not serious.
And that's it?
As far as they knew when they left for the hospital.
Well, we had a plane taking off from Chicago to L.A. Dumped an engine on the runway. Dumped it off the field here. This is a fire protection district manned by Des Plaines and Elk Grove Village. We responded in because we're close to the scene and have heavy crash vehicles. At the moment, I find, talking to the airlines, there was 276 people on the plane. And it indicates to me now that everybody has perished. Also, 3 people were injured in the trailer court, none serious.
Because instead of coming up the way they usually do, this plane was coming down towards where we were sitting. And when it got to right over our compound here, there was a pop and complete silence. The other engine went off. And then it just banked straight up and down, perpendicular to the ground. And the left wing tip dug in here, and when the wing collapsed, with all the fuel coming out the left-hand side, it just burst into flames.
Was the flame on fire at the time that you first saw it?
No, it wasn't on fire until it hit the ground. As soon as it hit the ground, it had a napalm effect. There was just a sheet of flame that shot across this whole area.
All right, we have coming up now, as we promised you, live from Los Angeles, reporter Leo McElroy, who will give us the story and the picture from Los Angeles. Leo?
Here at Los Angeles International Airport, American Airlines Flight 191 would have arrived in about 40 minutes from now. The arrival time was 4:39 Pacific Coast time. And at this point, the big problem at the information counter of American Airlines is dealing with the telephone calls of those who are wondering if their relatives were on board Flight 191. The information here is that there were only about 3 empty seats on that flight, and most of the inquiries are coming from those not knowing whether their relatives were on or not. Those who had friends or relatives or acquaintances in Chicago who were hoping to come back to Los Angeles but weren't clear in this airline crunch just which plane they would be on. Those inquiries have flooded American Airlines. The reservations counters are dealing almost exclusively with that and are telling those who call in that the only way they can be helped is on a callback basis, that if they will leave their telephone numbers, they will be notified when a passenger list is out. That list now, according to American Airlines officials here, is expected in about 1 hour. It's currently being compiled at another location, and when those names come out, the suspenseful and perhaps deadly waiting will be over. In the meantime, a reception area has been set up upstairs at Gate 42, where Flight 191 was to have arrived. And those relatives, 6, 8, 10 perhaps, who have already come here, are being taken care of in that area behind closed doors, kept away from the press, given a location to sit, to collect themselves, and in most of the cases to wonder whether they really have friends and acquaintances on board that flight. For now, it's the suspense here, the dealing with the calls, and the terror of not knowing for sure, in many cases, whether that flight will have brought a deadly message to many people in the Los Angeles area. That's the situation at L.A. International. Watchful, waiting, and a few tears. Leo McElroy at L.A. International Airport.
Mayor Byrne has just released this statement. I'd like to read it for you. We did speak with her earlier. This is what she said. On behalf of the people of Chicago, I want to express my heartfelt sympathy and sorrow for the victims of today's airplane crash and their families.
It's being called the worst air disaster in this nation's history. This afternoon's crash of a DC-10 jetliner packed with holiday travelers. The plane plunged to the ground just yards from a trailer park. All those aboard the plane perished. And tonight, in an expanded edition of Eyewitness News, we look at the disaster, how it happened, and the people involved. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Fahey Flynn.
And I'm Joel Daly.
And here's the latest at 10 o'clock. 272 people are dead, and the grim task of identifying